Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Power of Knowing Forums LinkedIn Live episode 157. Today we are discussing on the topic of words that move and how influential business writing shapes global success. To have this discussion, we have the honor of having Mr. Manoj Agarwal, Group Editor at Banking Frontiers and Founder Director of Local Infomart. Without further ado, let's bring our esteemed speaker to the podcast event. Hi, Manoj sir.
Hello, Prem Kumar. How are you?
Wonderful, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
We have Vijay also, who's my co-host. We will take roles in asking you some of the pointers that we wanted to discuss on the topic. Without further ado, I would like to ask, sir. I somewhere in a place where we see technology being the frontier, and people are not used to writing. Okay, and
Mhm.
this is one thing which I think you being an editor there on the Frontiers magazine in your career span, numerous roles across industries. What are the key journeys that you took to shape the writing today, business writing? And can you share a pivotal story that our audience can draw inspiration from, sir?
Okay, sure. That's a very good observation. And hello, Vijay. Looking forward to interacting with you as well.
Hello, Manoj.
So,
Yes, sir.
if you look at the technology shift that you alluded to earlier, just now, it's more and more technology used to be B2B driven. Business used to drive technology, and then slowly it would filter down to the consumer segment. In the last perhaps a decade or so, this trend has reversed. The consumer market is so big, whether it's for iPhones, whether it's for TVs, whether it's for anything, that more and more R&D is happening in the B2B segment,
Hmm.
and then that is getting transferred, sorry, B2C segment, and then B2B catches up with that. So we all know this. But in the content space also something similar is happening. 10, 20 years ago, B2B content writing used to be cutting edge. You'd look forward to something in Harvard Business Review or some prestigious publication. Nowadays, the best of content and the most insightful, I don't mean just entertaining content, the best meaningful business oriented content can be found on YouTube or LinkedIn, even Instagram kind of places. So here too, like technology, it's the B2C that has become the horse, and B2B has become the cart that is following this trend. This is something I observed over a period of time and have started to incorporate this in the content that I work with at Banking Frontiers and elsewhere. We're trying to give it a B2C flavor without losing the B2B seriousness. So, to just give an analogy, instead of wearing a suit, Western suit, you're now wearing a sherwani or a Modi jacket or something. You're
Okay.
still traditional or B2C or something, but you're maintaining the formality.
Okay.
To give an example, okay, let me give an example from my personal life. So, this is something I'm doing at work, what I described. But I learned something about the power of changing the framework of thinking pretty long ago in my life, in my career, in when was that? 1997, I think. So I was there was this. I was working at Lintas Advertising as IT head, and there was this ad by Contract Advertising, another advertising agency, looking for an IT head. And they described in their looking for people with this and this skills, database skills, networking skills, software development skills, all that. And I thought that was pretty weird because that is the description for a technical person, not a IT head. So I wrote back to them, and said, your description for what you need for an IT manager is wrong. What you really need is this, and this skills as opposed to technical skills. I said, what's the harm in writing and sending it? At first, they will reject it. But
Yeah.
surprisingly, it clicked. It
Okay.
clicked, and they liked the points that I made, and they gave me a job offer. So the point is, in writing, one does not have to stick to best practices, but one can look at next practices. It's a very dynamic field, just like technology. You have to adapt. And B from B2B to B2C is the current trend. Tomorrow it might change.
Okay. Good insights there, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for the insights, Manoj. Can you walk us through a real world scenario where influential uh, business writing played a crucial role in driving organizational success? What lessons did you take away from that experience?
So these days, the most common news kind of thing in the business world is XYZ is raising so many funds, so many $1 million. Someone has become a unicorn, and all that. You hardly see someone has won an award or someone. The regular kind of business news is not as juicy or as plentiful as this fundraising kind of thing. It's like as fundraising has become a business, a huge business in itself. So the question then arises: does writing have something to do with that? And I would say yes, uh, because if you're going to raise 50 million or 100 million or 10 million, whatever, you really have to convince the guy who's going to give you the money in terms of your business strategy, in terms of the business plan, in terms of the market scenario, all those parameters that a venture capitalist would look at. Now, these VCs, I know they look for stories and all that, but ultimately they have a team of analysts. It's not just a PPT that you're making. PPT is there, but behind any funding, there is a whole bunch of people who are looking at the numbers and at the text. So numbers is numbers. We are not talking about that. But that what you write and how it creates an impact on the VC, for example, is an indication of the power of writing today. It's a very emerging field, so it's not like copywriting in advertising or other such fields. It's a new emerging field, different kind of writing skills, but that I think is something to see that is happening today that can give some insight into the future, because this writing is very voluminous and advertising copywriting is right. And advertising copywriting is short content, catchy content, but here is meaningful content and in-depth content, and someone is going to question you. So you have to
Hmm.
yourself. So I think this is the frontier for writing, for business writing.
Sir, you said effective business communication, right? So, how or what are the most common pain points we've noticed in corporate writing? Because normal writing and a corporate writing is a whole difference where we communicate something, right? And how can individuals, whether freshers or top managers, overcome these kind of challenges? Because when we start writing, the pointer is whom do we address and how do we address is the first point that I think we should note. And on the corporate communication, and there should be a style that you write. So how do you look at this tricky situation or a challenge being addressed?
So there are two perspectives to keep in mind. One is quantity, other is quality. Um, so what happens today? One can if you do a Google search, you'll get, I don't know, 5 million results.
Yeah.
And today, in writing anything, formally within an organization or outside to someone outside the organization, there's always so much information to give that, if for even a small query, you can fill in 10, 20, 30 pages or 1,000 pages. So the person who's writing has to make sure that they're giving the relevant information. They should understand not only the question but the intent behind the question.
Hmm.
Okay, and that intent can come from the context, from the past conversation that has happened. um, in today's scenario, you also have to assume, you have to be clear whether that content is going to be consumed by an AI or by a human being or by both. Okay, if
Right.
it's going to be consumed by an AI, then the AI mind thinks differently. It is much more explicit. The human mind is much more capable of understanding nuances, subtleties. Um, the human mind can figure out if a word has multiple meanings. The human brain will figure out the right meaning in that context. The AI may or may not be able to do that. So, giving the relevant information out of an and not making an overload. In fact, for an AI, you may want to give an overload of information because AI can digest 1,000 pages as easily as it can digest one page.
Yeah.
Um, then again, if you the human being you're targeting, if you have 10 pieces of information, 10 is still a large number. If I ask you to memorize a 10-digit number, it's not going to be easy. 3 or 4 digits, you'll remember. So, um, so you need to categorize the information into 3, 4 buckets. If you have 10 pieces of information, two relate to money, three of them relate to customers, three of them relate to compliance, then put them in those buckets. So compliance 1, 2, 3, customers 1, 2, 3, whatever else. So once you bring the number of buckets down to 3 or 4, it becomes easy to digest for the other person. He does not have to repeatedly read it and try to
Yeah.
fit it in his mind what is being communicated.
Since you,
Um,
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, please.
The other thing is, of course, using storytelling techniques. It could be a personal anecdote. It could be a story from history, from the business world, from the world of fiction, from the world of mythology, anything like that. That helps reinforce. So that is the qualitative part. So quantitative part I described is how do you reduce it to a meaningful set. Qualitative is creating that impact so that even if it is one piece of information that is critical, then rather than saying it 3 times or highlighting it in bold, like speaking it aloud very forcefully, if you put it in a story form, then the human mind absorbs that very straightforward. Or you don't even have to tell a story. You can just say, this is like the situation for the tortoise and the rabbit.
Hmm.
The race between. So the guy gets the story, he gets the key aspect of the story, the message that you want to give, like slow and steady wins the race, or whatever is the message you want to give. And it really hits hard. So that qualitative aspect of communication is very important.
Sir, I was having it's not very far. I think yesterday's conversation with one of the discussions. So we were
Uh-huh.
talking about a tool, okay, where we spoke about a tool, and the question was, we are using that tool, right? And the question was, will you be in a position to manage the tool? Question was that.
Manage the tool.
Manage the tool. Can
Mm,
you manage the tool? That's the question. How difficult is this tool to be managed? That's the question.
okay. Okay.
Okay. My thought process was, in what sense? Do we
Sorry, I
have the
didn't
resource? In what sense?
get. Okay.
Are you talking about resources? Are you talking about the technology capabilities? Are you talking about the features? These are the three things that came in when that question came up.
Okay.
So if a guy is asking me a bit, it looks like a very basic question. Can you manage the tool? I'll say yes. In what sense? That kind
So,
of a situations when come in corporate, how do we handle? That's the crux of that point that I wanted to understand from you. When you write to corporate writing, how do you? The question looks very simple. Can we manage the tool? Simple question. As a person who is going to give that tool, what are the points that you should take into consideration while replying a simple question
okay.
like that?
So managing the tool, one part is proficiency with the tool.
Hmm.
If you use a tool for several months or years, so you can. It's like driving a cycle. First time you drive a cycle, it's really tough.
Hmm.
You need someone to handhold you. After 2 3 months, you are on your own,
Yeah,
and after 2 3 years, you are a champion.
great.
Uh, so that's the same with any kind of tool that you are using. The only difference is tools in earlier days were unifunctional.
Yeah,
A knife does the job of cutting, needle does the job of threading, but then you have this Swiss Army knife kind of things with
yeah,
multiple. And now everything, a phone, a computer, uh, TV, everything is multifunctional.
correct.
Now the issue is not being expert in using the tool, but being an expert in using the 10 or 100 or 1,000 features in that tool.
Exactly.
And to add to the confusion, multiple tools have the same kind of functionality. So you can write, you have the equivalent of Microsoft Word and so many softwares, and you have communication tools, writing tools, speech conversion tools.
No,
So that,
I'll little debrief here when we speak about the tool. It is a tool which is used for website building, and we have little knowledge on it.
uh-huh,
Now, I think where the question came was that can we manage the tool? Was my interpretation was we can manage the tool because it is a GUI tool. First point. Second point is what is our proficiency,
uh-huh,
right? That tool, I think they've used it for once. After that, it is static. We've not touched it because it is working fine. The website is good and there. Now, who did
right,
it? We don't know. Now,
right.
can we manage, can turn into a different piece also now? Do we have the skill set? We brought this tool. How, do we have people who can work on that? Right? And how is the proficiency on that? So, why I'm taking this specific is because I want to understand from a corporate writing. Here, the difference makes is how do I communicate when a simple question like this comes that has multifolded pointers there. So, how do we look at is what I had a confusion there, sir. Your inputs is what I wanted to check.
So when it comes to a tool, so how things are changing is using AI, you tell the tool what you want and how
Hmm.
that job has AI decides or the intelligence inside the tool decides. So self-driving car is an example of that. I want to go from my home to my office. I don't have to tell turn left here, turn right here, brake here, stop. The technology, the intelligence does it on its own. Tomorrow there'll be devices that can cook your meal. You tell,
Hmm.
I want this, and it will pick up the right recipes, the right ingredients, cook it, and give it to you. So I'm sure
Yeah,
in factories, in food factories, that is already happening.
yeah.
Uh, in the home kitchen, that will happen soon, sooner or later. So the need to learn the skill of using a tool is diminishing. Even software code, you just tell the AI, I want a software that does this, this, and this, and it will give you the code. But
Explore it.
coming to the writing part of it, we need to distinguish between writing and communicating. Writing to me is the part where you are talking to yourself, where you are thinking and figuring out what to write. So writing is, in my the way I define it, the core of writing is you talking to yourself to figure out what to put down.
Hmm.
Because you cannot write just anything
Yeah,
randomly. You have to think before you write. In speaking, it's not that case. You can just speak.
yeah,
As you're thinking, you're speaking. But in writing, you first think, then you put down. So the technology that is being used is your brain, and you mostly know how to manage your brain. You just have to spend a good amount of time and concentration to think about what to write.
true.
The more impactful you want your writing to be, the more effort you have to put in thinking. For example, if I'm writing a novel, okay, I can just start writing something happening, hero, heroine, some fighting, some love, some
Yeah,
random story come out. But I'm sure that, let's say, J.K. Rowling, when she writes a story about all these flying witches and magic and stuff like that, she is really thinking before she writes. She's
hmm,
visualizing, she's looking at options, she's thinking, does this make sense? Whatever she thinks. So the point is, writing is about thinking. That's where you get the real value of writing. The act of putting it on a piece of paper or typing it on a keyboard is communication. That's not writing. So
hmm.
your thinking is your writing.
Okay. Got most of the answers that I had in mind. So I think I'll relate it there, sir. What to you, Vijay?
Yeah, thank you for your insights, Manoj. Uh,
Sure.
since you talked about digital communication tool, uh, I get one question in my mind. With the rapid evaluation of digital communication tools, right?
Mhm.
What trends do you see impacting the way we write for business? How can leaders and employees alike adopt to ensure their messaging stays relevant and impactful?
Okay. Messaging stays relevant and impactful.
Yes.
So there are two parts to it. So if you're writing for one person, then you know what is relevant to that person. But if you're writing to 10 people, if there's a committee that you're writing to, and the committee comprises of people from different backgrounds, people, one from HR, one from marketing, one from sales, one from finance, whatever it is, then it's a challenge how to make it relevant to all of them. And what what can one do? One can focus on the problem rather than the profile of that person, because presumably this writing is to solve some problem or capture some opportunity, and focusing on that and giving clarity on that is one way to make sure that it is relevant for multiple people in the audience. Is there some other way? Yes, you can make it more. Okay, let me come to the impactful part. You can increase the impact part in two ways. One is, like I said earlier, storytelling. If you tell a personal story or a real story or a fictional story, then the impact is higher. Other way to increase the impact is to put facts. So numbers, dates, amounts. So instead of saying the company raised a huge amount of money, we can say the company raised $25 million. Or instead of saying the company's rating was increased, it increased from AA to AA plus, something factual. or you can give, say, this happened in 1927, or you can say there were 10,000 investors. So as long as you're giving factual information, whether it's a number, whether it's an amount, whether it's a date, whether it's a distance, whether it's time, all those makes that information more hardcore, more relevant, more believable, even more believable. If I say Prem Kumar is an is very rich, and I say Prem Kumar's net worth is $1 billion, that very rich is still subjective. It's, you still don't know how much. You may or may not believe it. You may feel that maybe Manoj is lying, maybe he's not so rich. But when I put a figure, then that becomes concrete, and hence it becomes much more believable. So these are two techniques that I can think of to improve impact. And relevance, as I said, is focus on the problem or the opportunity and not digress.
I think that's a important point. What you have told, it is when you put a hard fact or a number to it, we can relate to that. That gives you factual information. And the second point that you are trying to tell us is that when I name a person, I am referring to a person with this kind of a net worth, or this is the value that he is going to carry, or this is where he stands at the moment, which is subject to change based on verifications, but that is a ballpark or a benchmark that I can say this guy is worth this, or this product is worth this, right? That's what you're trying to say, being precise,
Yes.
right, Manoj? Okay, thank you for
Anything
that.
that is
Yeah,
factual is easy to is much more readily accepted.
accepted.
So I'll give you another example. If I say mass and energy are the same,
Hmm.
you may or may not believe.
Yeah,
But if I say Einstein got a Nobel Prize for proving that mass and energy are the same, then it's much more believable.
yeah, got it. Now, with this communication being so digress and people get uh, overwhelmed with the kind of data that we are sharing,
Uh-huh.
empathy is increasingly becoming a vital skill in the leadership and communication part, right? Especially when addressing sensitive topics like layoffs in the organization, crisis in the organization, or a major change or a challenge that the organization is facing. How do we look at this at a human centric communication pointer?
Right, right. Especially it is from top to bottom, then empathy definitely plays a very key role. Empathy is a lens that the consumer of the information is looking at whatever is coming. So that gets filtered. So if you're wearing a red lens, then everything looks red to you. So if you're wearing an empathy lens, then you're looking for empathy in everything.
Yeah.
So coming to the answer, um, I guess again in this case I can give you two ways to do this. One is to tell stories, to communicate using stories and anecdotes and real incidents, uh, because then it looks not made up. Then it looks like you're not just saying something for the sake of saying or writing something for the sake of writing. It looks much more genuine. So anything that is more genuine is generally more caring, more empathetic kind of thing. The other technique is, especially in writing, to use a B2C flavor and less of a B2B flavor. B2B is B2C is usually more genuine, more appealing, more impactful, something that you can relate to. You can get a feeling that the other person also has a similar issue or challenge. In B2B, it's very narrow bandwidth. I mean, there's no emotional language. So You
There
cannot
is
connect.
narrow scope for having a emotional thing when you look at a B2B.
Exactly.
Because
Ex-
I think what we look at is more a straight one-to-one kind of a thing, and most of the thing is customer to customer or business to business. That's what you're trying to say, right?
So empathy is an emotion,
Yeah.
and if you're using language which is lacking emotion, then that emotion does not get conveyed. So if you use a B2C flavor, then it will get through.
Okay. Vijay?
Yeah. If I look at our audience, from
Mhm.
fresh graduates to C-suite executives, our audience varies greatly in experience. How can
Hmm.
business writing be tailored to engage such diverse groups effectively? Can you share any best practices that can be applied?
Tailored to diverse groups. Okay. So we touched upon this. Okay, I can give a few examples. So, for example, if you're writing, if you want to, let's say, bring in a certain culture in the organization by writing about it. So, one thing is to say, okay, these are the 10 elements of our culture. But that doesn't really click. Uh, so, another way to say the same thing is to, let's say, point to a role model. Let's say someone says Ratan Tata.
Hmm.
Okay, he's the role model for the culture we want in our organization. Then you talk about his beliefs, his stories, how he treated an organization that was falling apart, how he found a new purpose to merge two or three different organizations, how he went out of the way to, I don't know, start something, launch a new business industry, maybe open up a factory in a remote place, uh, something. So if you want people to relate, you have to bring the human angle. And referring to role models is one thing. You can also write about, uh, let's say, you can pick up from history major events that have happened.
Hmm.
Uh, for example, there is this war happening in the Middle East. But if you go back to wars that have Indo-Pak War, for example, if you take that as a part of the communication and you want to tell your people to be brave and courageous, to fight against all odds, so it's one thing to write that in plain English, our
Hmm.
company's policy, we will fight against all odds, but that doesn't work. But if you give the context of an Indo-Pak war or something, that will click. That message will make an impact.
I think what you're saying is you refer to an incident or a important event that can trigger a larger discussion or a pointer that can be elaborated. Is that what you're saying, Manoj?
To make it a more generic answer, there is something. So Indo-Pak war is already there in minds of a lot of people, of a certain age group.
Yeah.
So that is already occupying important space. You just have to latch onto that.
Yeah.
Instead of creating a new space, you're building on top of
What is
an
there?
existing. Yeah, instead of building a new building, you're adding a floor on top of an existing building.
Okay.
And then, so this is an analogy to explain that catching on to something that's already there and well established is an easy way to get people. So something completely new is hard work for the mind,
Hmm.
but just 10% more is okay.
Okay.
Easy to absorb, easy to understand. Let me
Hmm.
put it this way: if our brain has to understand something new, let's say it needs 100 units of energy to do that,
Okay.
100 units of something resource.
Hmm.
But if I'm latching on to something that's already there, then it needs, let's say, 10 units of that resource. So that 10 units is much more easier than 100 units. So as a person who's writing for you, it may be just 50 words, whichever way. But if those 50 words include something that's already there in the mind of the person, then it catches on quickly. I'll give you one more example to explain this point. Let's take a poem. Mary had a little lamb.
Hmm.
Okay. How many words is that? I don't know, around 60, 70, 80 words, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you are an information science person, you will count that as 70 words.
Hmm.
So 70 bytes or something, 200 bytes or something. But if you look at how the human mind works, Mary had a little lamb. Once I say you don't need to know the whole thing.
Hmm.
That that 5 bytes is enough.
Okay.
It's a name. You don't need the whole thing. So if you communicate in a way that you're using less bandwidth by using things that the person already knows,
Hmm.
you can communicate much more impactful. So in 1 minute, you can communicate much more than if you tell the whole story bit by bit.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
a kind of chunking is what you're talking about. You can put it as chunking. Yeah. Okay.
But the chunking is happening in the mind of the receiver, not the sender.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
That's the beauty.
Got it. Got it. Now, coming to we often tend to send a mail, and then we say, I should have not sent this mail. I think
Ah,
there's something which I'm missing. Okay. Throughout your our career, there has been, I think, a lot of crafting mistakes that we have done, and that influences business communication in a good or bad way. Sometimes it goes bad. Some of the communications come up good. What
yes.
advice? What advice should you look at giving to those looking to avoid some pitfalls there? So kind of say this could be kind of a good word. No, I always had one pointer is when you draft a mail,
Hmm.
it should be talking to you, then it can receive by the other. How it can be received by the other person is what I keep in mind. Is that one way of looking it, or you have any other thoughts around it?
There are many ways of preventing mistake. The obvious one is to read carefully what you have written and don't send. Um, Second is I'll give a little counter to this. I'm saying
Yeah.
it's right to make mistakes once in a while. You're human.
Yeah.
You're a computer. If you make a mistake, let's say giving a wrong number or giving the wrong suggestion or something like that, there is usually always an opportunity to fix that. It's not that that mistake is written in stone. That whatever you have written, it cannot be undone. Uh, People on were we are social animals. We are not machines.
Yeah.
So we understand that there are mistakes, genuine mistakes.
Mm.
Sometimes we deliberately lie also. So human communication is very fuzzy.
Yeah.
So avoiding mistakes is a mechanical way of looking at it. You might actually appear more human if, for example, there are spelling mistakes in your text. If your text is completely sanitized,
Mm.
then it gives the impression that it is there's some mechanical or some machine element to it.
Okay.
But if there are small grammatical errors, something like that, you forget a comma or instead of past tense you say future tense. It
Yeah, that
really
that regularly happens with me on one of the pointer is I think in my mind is I should not, and normally I forget that not.
oh okay.
And that's been a kind of thinking that while I think I type, this is not supposed to be done. So
Hmm.
I miss a not, it is supposed to be done is what is the message goes in. And then when I go and say, did I miss? Then I see, oh, I've missed it. So I'll call them. There's a mistake, my regular problem. I tell these people because that's been one of the challenge that I have in my communication is I think
Oh,
something and that not is one thing I don't know how I miss that.
the naughty problem for you.
Yeah.
But look at the beautiful side. You make a mistake and then you write back to the person apologizing and with the correction. Those two messages have a much bigger impact than the one message which is completely correct.
Okay.
Think about it this way. It's more likely to have a bigger impact.
Okay.
So let's not worry too much about written mistakes, except, for example, I'm sending a legal notice.
Yeah.
In all the legal cases, mistakes can be expensive.
So I've changed something like this shouldn't be done. So I've changed
Oh,
because I forget the not. This shouldn't be done is what I've started to write now.
that's a
So
good one. Right.
or we will not take up this task kind of a thing. So
One must understand that one email or is part of a bigger thing. It's not
yeah.
by itself. There's something preceding it. There's something post it,
Hmm.
and they're all connected. So any mistake in any portion can be rectified.
Okay. Okay. Good.
So it's not like a
Hard
yeah.
written stone kind of thing. What you said earlier, right? Yeah. Vijay, like what?
Yeah. How can C-suite executives leverage clear, concise, and empathetic writing to shape company strategy, engage stakeholders, and lead during challenging times?
Yes, challenging times. That's tough. Um, see, the human mind, uh, our tendency is to tell it as it is. Okay, and that works well in normal times, but in challenging times, that's not a good strategy. For example, we normally communicate slow and steady pace. But if there's a bomb blast near me, I'm not going to communicate slow and steady. I'm going to shout. I'm going to scream. I'm going to push someone if needed. Um, so one has to react according to the situation, uh, and not be, even if you're writing, don't be bogged down by the normal. If it's a special situation, you write गाली डालना है, you put गाली मतलब, if it will serve a purpose, then that's fine. Uh, or you want to exaggerate something, then exaggerate if the situation demands so. Um, so that is from the point of view of the person who's saying. But any communication that goes out ultimately is interpreted by the person receiving it. And when that person is interpreting information, when you're sending, let's say, writing to me, I interpret it in two. There are dual interpretations of that, of everything. One is an interpretation of the meaning of what you have said. Okay. So the question that you asked me, Vijay, I will understand the meaning of that. But in many situations, that incoming communication may create a feeling. The feeling may be anger or sadness or happiness or fear or anxiety or worry or love or whatever it is. In business communications, feelings are not that common. But if it is in a challenging situation, that kind of, let's say, fear might be there in the message that's coming. So I read that paragraph, I understand the meaning, but I also become afraid.
Yeah.
Now, when I become afraid, what happens is I react to the fear first and then to the meaning.
Hmm.
Because for the reaction to that emotion is very immediate, it's automatic, literally. You don't even have to think, how should I react? You just react because that emotion is so powerful. So, when writing, keep in mind that the meaning will be conveyed and a feeling will be conveyed. And if you want the person to react to the feeling, then make sure that the feeling is more important than the meaning. Because once I feel something, anger, let's say, the meaning doesn't matter much. Maybe in the another conference I'll be discussing, or in another session like this, I'll discuss about the meaning of that, which is a totally different context. Or I might tell my wife something like this after one day. But on the spot, it is a feeling which makes an impact. So the focus should be on the feeling, if there is a feeling. Else, focus on the meaning, and ideally focus on both.
Yeah.
So, Manoj, I have one pointer to understand here is, see, now we spoke about how it is to be written when it is a communication that is going to be strategies, right? Now,
Hmm.
how do we look at a gap when we see we have cross culture audience? How
Come again.
cross
How do we look
cross culture audience,
cross?
international? Yeah.
Okay.
So, what challenges have you faced when writing to international or cross culture audience, and how did business bridge those gaps, communication gaps
Okay.
in diverse environments?
Yes, it's
Because
a challenge.
I'll give you another pointer to it. Why I'm asking that question is, now in India, if I ask you, Manoj, please help me,
Hmm.
it's a help. But if I ask it in the UK or somewhere, if I say put a please, it is kind of an order, is what I understand, right?
Oh. Okay.
So that's the point that I wanted to understand. What I understood, this is a recent, again, recent issue that I faced, where I had
Uh-huh.
written for a very long pending thing. I had put a please. Can you address this? So what I understood from that audience is that please means in the other parts of the world, it is order. It
Wow.
means that you are not doing it, so please do it.
Right.
In
Okay.
India, if I ask you, can you please help me? That becomes a kind of a context where saying this guy is not able to do something and he's asking for help. So, how do we look at these cultural audiences where we look at business communications? That's what I wanted to understand from you, Manoj.
Very interesting. So there are two parts to it. One is either you know the culture of the other person, like he's Italian or Japanese or Hindu or Muslim or old or young or whatever it is. Other is you don't know, or else you're writing so that it's going to be read by multiple people of different cultures.
Right,
So the police kind of example is tricky, but if you look at so that is one problem. But if you look at the overall messaging, then sticking to facts is a good idea. So if you
yeah,
say 1941 this happened, that doesn't change across cultures.
right.
If you use numbers, facts, all those kind of very
That does not change.
that does not change. So there is no multiple meanings coming out of that. Multiple meanings sometimes often comes out of adjectives. So
Hmm.
when I say big or small or tiny, tiny may mean just tiny in some culture. Tiny may mean derogatory in some culture.
Okay,
Uh, or so different adjectives could have different connotations. So being careful about using the adjectives is one way to minimize friction, minimize miscommunication that can happen. Um, Again, you can try to embed meaning and feelings together. So if the feeling is conveyed, uh, irrespective of the culture, if you talk about the freedom movement, freedom revolution, independence revolution of different countries, whether it's India or China or Japan or South Korea or Germany or whatever it is, then that carries a particular connotation that is cross cultural. So one can, and in writing, you have the time, you usually have the time to be uh, to be choosy about what you write. You can think and write, as opposed to speaking extempore. So you can refer to factual things. You can refer to things that have a common meaning across, common positive meaning, ideally across cultures. Um, what else can you do? Yes, one more technique. So if I want to say, if I want to, before saying a fact, if I put a question before that fact, so I'll give let's create an example. If I want to say this investment is going to yield a ROI of 18%.
Mm.
Okay. So normally this sounds non-culturally, but I'm saying if you put a question before that, what is the kind of ROI you can expect? And then you give that information.
Mm.
Chances are that ambiguity or cultural nuances could shrink a little because you explicitly saying upfront that what you're going to answer. So before
Got
the person agrees on an answer, he will have agreed. Mostly, he would have agreed on the question.
Yeah,
So
got it.
chances differences are a bit reduced.
Yeah. Yeah.
That could be one technique.
All right. Authenticity is a key to building trust. Yet it can be difficult to balance with corporate messaging. How do you ensure your communication remains authentic while also aligning with business goals and values?
Hmm. Yes, authentic is very important. But one must understand that human beings don't look at communication as being authentic or not. It is the person who is authentic or not. It's a
Yes.
human property.
Yeah.
Trust is also a human property,
Mm.
at least an organization property. You may trust a bank, or you may trust an IT company, or a newspaper company, or something, or a website. So it's person and organization dependent. Trust and authenticity. Give me 1 second. I need to connect my phone because the battery is running low. Give me one
Yeah.
second.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Is it okay if I tilt it?
Yeah,
Or does
not
it?
a problem. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were talking of authenticity and trust.
Yes.
So it's a people thing. So a communication is not authentic or trustable in itself. If it's coming from a trustable source, then it will be seen as more trustable and authentic. Uh, Again, I'm going back. If you put more factual information, it is likely to be easy to accept it, whatever is being said. Um, and the other angle you raise, empathy. If the communication is empathic, it is more likely to be perceived as authentic and trustable.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
is another way to build the trust and authenticity. So, one more thing, trust is something that is built up over a period of time. It
Mm.
goes from zero to whatever, 100, let's say. Authentic is more digital. It's not zero to 100, it's more like zero or one.
Okay.
So that one difference is there between the two. Uh, so even if something comes from an untrustable source, it may be seen as authentic. I'll give an example. It's a rather silly example, but if some kidnapper sends you a ransom note, uh, you might believe that it's authentic, even
Yeah,
though the person you would not trust.
yeah, got it.
So there's a difference between the.
Great insight, sir. With this, we come to a conclusion and we are on top of that. I would like to summarize on what we discussed today on a
Sure.
high level stuff. I've taken some pointers on what we discussed. We spoke
Okay.
about the industry impact and how the journey of starting to write in business communication is today. Some stories that we have took is taken challenges in communication, adopting some of the digital trends that we spoke about, how human centric communication is there, and the influential of writing in different audience across various cultures and stuff is what is that we do. And we spoke about little of best practices as well, some lessons for the mistakes that we do. And we spoke about we are all human and we do make mistakes, and at times that mistakes help you as also is what we spoke, and try to understand looking at a bigger picture. We spoke about C-suite insights and crafting strategy through writing. That's one more point that we spoke about. And how do we bridge the gaps that are international and cross-cultural audience when we're looking at challenges? That is one thing that we do. We spoke about authenticity in business writing, and we also spoke about some of the communications where leaders can look at or people can look at, from freshers to people, is what we discussed overall. So on a overall picture, this was the discussion that we had in terms of what we are trying to write, and the topic of words that move, how influence business writing shapes the global success. I think with this, I think we are with the pointers that we wanted to check with you. We are good. You have any final pointers that you would like to have to the audience before we conclude?
Um, I would only like to say that most people think writing is a pain, and so did I in the early days of my life.
Hmm.
But once you do it, and once you see the results of that, then it's no longer painful. Then the you start getting the ROI on that effort that you put in. But that ROI will come only after you've crossed a certain level of expertise. So initially, you have to struggle. Uh, you will not get the good ROI. But once you reach a certain level, um, it's good. It's really good. I get so much respect and so much admiration and so much liking from so many people in the industry because of this writing skill, um, which was not the case 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So it's worth it. I mean, for example, if someone writes a book, you write a book, and even if it is moderately successful, you have achieved a level. You have risen to a particular level. Because very few people are able to write a book.
Now, I take that point completely, sir, because I am not also a good writer. So I used to listen to a lot of books and stuff. I'm an audio guy. But what happened after Mr. Vijay's initiative of starting this podcast, and we started looking at, we're trying to
Mhm.
find ways to write the topics, the titles. We are trying to see how we can write them up and see how we can discuss them in the discussions. That is one thing that is moving us to write more and more. That's the learning that we have taken from these podcasts. That's a very great thing that we got into writing, understanding, to putting topics into it, reevaluating, and then bringing up the titles and stuff for all the podcasts that we have been doing.
Right,
So that's a
absolutely. I'll
great
give you
learning
one
for
more,
us. Yeah, yes, sir.
give you one more context. Something I figured out about a year ago that if a nation has to be perceived as a thought leader, as an excellent, some kind of excellence, that nation needs to have people who can write well. If you want to win a Nobel Prize or a literature prize or something, or you want to write in Wall Street Journal on any of the well-known publications anywhere in the world, India has to have good writers, not just people who are good at coding or people who are good at maths or people good at some other things. As a nation, we have not emphasized writing, but until we do have good writers, we will not. There's a glass ceiling that we will not go beyond.
Okay.
We have to build that skill in the country. And I'm not saying language skills, English skills or Hindi skills, but writing skills, so that people can appreciate. You may do the best R&D, but if you can't write, you will not get a Nobel Prize. For example,
Got it, sir.
they would,
Got it.
the Nobel Committee will not see you made a great video that about 1 billion views about your chemistry or biology or something. You have to write and get it published.
Correct. So the writing thing is the major part that we look at when we start our podcast. We write every pointer that we are supposed to look at and deliberate them, and then talk to the speaker who is going to be part of it and say, this is what we have tried. How do you want to turn it around and stuff like that. So that
Absolutely.
helped us a lot of knowledge that we have gained over writing. And that brings us to our lesson. Thank you for being here today, sir. It's been great to
I'm
have you back. To the audience, we have streamed this from the link from LinkedIn. You are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram simultaneously. We hope this discussion is valuable for you today, and thank you for joining us today. Our next podcast is 158 podcast that is going to be happening tomorrow. Success versus words, war, mergers and acquisitions, the Regenesis way, tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. IST. Looking forward to see you there. Good day. Bye for now, sir. Bye for everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Vijay.
Thank
Lovely
you.
interaction with you.
Thank you, sir.